as everyone in the country is focused on the wrong things, busy partying, wasting your monies. You don't care about the poor people. You don't care to give back to the society. You don't care what's happening with people who don't have. Let me expose something to you and you're gonna listen for yourself. Apparently, there is 13 million plus children who are suffering from poverty. Before we even count their parents, we're talking about children, not their parents. So if you want to add parents, grandparents, it will even be more in the millions, suffering from poverty, extreme poverty, failing to eat, failing to feed themselves, failing to survive in this world. More than 13 millions. Despite all the government funding, the grants, more than 13 million children suffer from poverty. Listen to this.
13 million children in South Africa live in poverty, despite the government spending 10% of the GDP to address child poverty. This is according to a report by the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. The child poverty study highlights South Africa's murder rate of 5.5 per 100,000 children, which is 4 times that of the global rate. Joining us now to discuss this is Nelson Mandela Children's Fund's CEO, Dr. Linda Ncube Ngoma. Doctor, thank you so much for your time and for joining us this morning. Now, you conducted a study as the Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. Talk to us about your findings with regards to the current state of child poverty in the country, and what are the most pressing challenges that you found that are faced by approximately 13 million children who are living in poverty?
Good morning, Katlego, and good morning to your viewers, and thank you for having us on the show to talk about the study. The study shows that between government, the private sector, and NGOs, a tremendous amount of money is going into addressing the needs of the 13 million children that you talked about. Now, this is a study that was done by Deloitte Africa in partnership with Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. And so they used a multidisciplinary team to come up with the findings that are then shared in the report. So this report is showing that government is spending plus or minus, so an estimated 700 billion rand a year on child-related expenditure, which includes free schooling, nutrition at schools, as well as the social grant that gets given to children. Now, what we find is that specifically with the social grant that's intended to assist these children, that grant for a lot of instances is the only source of income in the home. So that 500 Rand grant then has got to be spread throughout an entire family. And so it undermines, or it's greatly compromising the nutritional value of food that children are getting. So that's on the expenditure side. What is, the manner in which the expenditure is going in, trickling down. And we're talking about, not small sums of money when you consolidate the numbers, but the children ultimately are not benefiting from the food aspect of the grant in a manner that would really help them developmentally from the time that they are born up to the point that, they're getting into learning facilities. And I think the important thing that's coming out of this report is that we need to go back to the drawing table and say, we've got this policy, we've had it for X number of years, it's not giving us the results that we need. How should we be investing differently in order for us to start getting the results that we need? What we also did was to use a longitudinal study that is done by the NIDS that tracks families over a period of time. And that study shows that, if a child can get and finish matric, the distance between the children who come from privileged homes and those who don't, but who do finish a tertiary qualification, once they get into adulthood, the difference from an earnings perspective or from a financial perspective, starts to be closed. So we need to be looking at these 13 million children. How do we invest differently so that we can cut that generational cycle of poverty? Because poverty is generational. So if we don't intervene in the correct manner that benefits the children, I can guarantee that their children are most likely to also be on grants that are coming from government. And I think the other finding that's important is the economic potential economic contribution that is lost, the human capital deprivation to the country that we saw from the study. And basically what the study is saying is that if we invest it differently and we can get these children to meet their full economic potential, whether as employers or employees, they could contribute an estimated 1.3 trillion rand into the South African economy. And that's a huge sum of money for us not to stop and say, well, how do we invest differently to get that kind of return?
We certainly should be looking into such, especially like you mentioned, for the long-term benefits of these young children. Does your study show in terms of demographics, whether in rural areas or township areas where most of these children are impacted by these high levels of poverty?
No, the study didn't delve into location because basically what we did was to look at what are the government allocations into the different needs of children. But we do know, even though the study does not show that the majority of children that we will be talking about are likely to be found in rural areas and in informal settlements and in townships. So we're not going to be talking about children that, for example, would be found in fourways. We are likely to be talking about children that are in deep, hard to reach rural areas before the middle class located children.
Right. You spoke a little earlier on about the gaps that exist in the current approach in terms of how we are dispersing all the resources that are put towards the children who are in poverty. Why do you think it's taken us so long to even just realize that these approaches are not working?
Well, I think, there's always so many things that are happening at any given point in time. And, I can't answer for a policy level, but, if I just think of the multiple things that are happening at any given point in time, it could be that we've said, look, there's a grant for children, they're getting free food at school, there's this and the other in place, so at least where children are concerned, we're okay. But we've not taken the time to holistically look at the return, the social return on investing in children from the monies that are going into them. And I must say that this work that Deloitte has done for us is a groundbreaking piece of work that's been done over a period of about 8 months. Because as you know, the work was being done, they'll come back and say, oh, you know what, Dr. Linda, actually we're taking longer than we thought we would to look for this information because we can't find people who have done similar work. And by similar work, I'm looking at the holistic cost. So you might find that someone would have done work that focused solely on one element of a child's need versus the return. Whereas in this instance, we looked at the holistic picture. So I think now is an opportune time because now we've got the numbers. Now the work has been done. If it wasn't done before, well, it wasn't done before. But I think the important thing is what do we need to do differently now that we know what it's costing us and we know the opportunities that are lost by this underdeveloped human capital in South Africa. I think that's really where we want to focus the conversation and to really bring in, many minds to look at this issue so that from the diversity of perspectives, we can come up with a solution